Hi, welcome to the open space with Aura. I'm very excited, as unexperienced as I am, to see my dream come true, because the very first guest in this new channel is Dr. Aaron Kindsvatter, and I'll ask Dr. Aaron to introduce himself, and then I'll tell why I really wanted him to be the first guest. Aaron, where you work, what you do, who you are.
Well, thanks so much, Aura. I'm so excited to be your first guest, and I've really enjoyed our conversations, and I'm really happy to have the opportunity to have this conversation with you. So, I am a professor of counseling at the University of Vermont, and I've come into I become known on a minor scale for some videos that I made objecting to the habits of mind that are being taught at the University of Vermont in regard to racism. That there are some habits of mind that are going around that are informed by critical race theory and exceptionally radical forms of intersectionality. And those ideas culminated in a teach-in put on by the University of Vermont administration called Turning Towards Whiteness, in which many of the ills of society that we are experiencing were attributed to people of a particular race. And so I've made some videos about that, and have been interviewed some about that. And I suppose I've been canceled as a result of that. One of the things that happened is that with the encouragement of the administration of the University of Vermont, there was a change.org petition started asking me to resign. So I think that brought me into your world a little bit, in that I think we're seeing some of the same phenomenon in higher education.
Yeah, it's interesting because in introduction to my channel, I mentioned few words about if we keep canceling each other, we will have no one to cancel at the end. And by canceling each other, we cancel ourselves.
Yeah.
But it's interesting. I first met you at Benjamin Boy's podcast, where I also went a few weeks before you. And the thing that was striking to me is the very beginning of that conversation, where you said that you felt consistently sick in the stomach for a prolonged period of time. Mm-hmm. And you just couldn't bear it any longer.
Yeah.
So my question to you now, I imagine it wasn't from one day to the next that you made the decision, okay, let me go talk about this. Let me break open my silence. And I imagine it was tremendous amount of fear, your personal fear that you had to confront. And it seems to me from my own experience that if we suppress that fear, if I suppress that fear, I start feeling physically sick, physically not well. It paralyzes me, it occupies my mind, and the only way to do something about it, it just go toward it.
Yeah.
So, and it seems that that's what you've done. And later on, you confessed to me that you feel much better.
I do. So much better. And it's interesting. Fear, certainly. The question is, fear of what? And there were so many different things to be afraid of. I remember as a younger person, and especially as an untenured person, I suppose my fear was for keeping my job and not wanting to be fired. And I still have that a little bit. But I don't think that's what made me sick. And there was about 2 years ago in 2018,
Mhm.
our school, there were some protests at the University of Vermont, and I closely following those protests, the dean of our college, the College of Education and Social Services, acquiesced to the demands that the protesters had made and indicated that we were going to have diversity, equity, and inclusion integrated throughout the college, and that was to become a part of professors' annual evaluations. And it was close to that time that I really started to become sick, because what was being touted as diversity, equity, and inclusion, as nice as those words probably sound to folks who are not, who've not been exposed to what's going on college campuses in the last few years, were not ideas that I could ever find myself in good conscience getting on board with and trying to sell to new generations of mental health professionals. They were ideas that, in fact, I felt morally compelled to act against. And I think the tension of feeling like I was going to have to comply with the increasingly ideological, the demands that were being placed on me to teach, while at the same time knowing that these ideas are just wrong and liable to detract from the mental health of people, as opposed to fortifying the mental health of people, which is my particular area of concern as a professor of counseling. That dissonance, I think, was part of what was making me ill. I think there's also something incredibly dehumanizing, and maybe this was also, a source of fear that was, but it's not fear, it's fear and humiliation. When you have to say something in order to get a reward, being, in order to be regarded well within the college, in order to look good for promotion, or when you have to say something in order to avoid punishment, like losing your job or being accused of being anti-DEI. Those are circumstances that yes, there's fear of the consequences of not getting the promotion. Yes, there's fear of the consequences of losing the job, but there's also a kind of humiliation, a kind of powerlessness that goes hand in hand with being put in a position where, let's say, a cause, people who are supporting a cause take it upon themselves to tell you what you must think and what you must say. And it's even worse in some ways than people telling you what you mustn't think and what you mustn't say.
Yeah, it corrupts your sense of personal integrity and dignity.
I think for me, even as you say that, I can feel that in my stomach. And so I think, so for me, the fear is I don't want to suggest that I wasn't worried about losing my job. Yet on the other hand, the much more frightening thing for me was to be put in a situation where I would have to be saying something that I believe not only to be false, but destructive. And that's when I really started to get sick. I mean, this narrative has been going on for a long time at the University of Vermont, but no administrators ever talked about integrating it into the annual evaluation until 2018.
Yeah. You know what I observe lately, especially in facing undergraduate students in class, but also high schoolers, they absolutely terrified of asking questions or engaging with questions, terrified of giving wrong answers or not politically correct answers. And I see that they slowly shutting down, kind of hiding into the hood. Don't touch me, don't talk to me, just assign me chapter from the textbook, which I never would do because it's not how I teach. And it's almost, it seems to me that it creates more and more disengaged, disinterested, not to say alienated breed of young students. I wanted to ask you if you observe the same.
Well, I have some guesses about that. Yes, I think overall, I've been very impressed with the students that I've encountered in the course of my work, in the sense that they generally are willing to speak truth to power in a respectful way, in that, you know, oftentimes as I've been teaching in a heterodox manner, which is to say presenting different ideas for their consideration, they have felt very comfortable in criticizing, shall we say, non-progressive, but not, I'm thinking of people like John McWhorter, who I don't think considers himself to be a conservative, but neither are his views progressive. And they seem to be very comfortable.
Let's say thinking person. It's easy. John McWhorter is a thinking person.
John
I admire
McWhorter is
him.
a thinking person. Coleman Hughes is a thinking
Yes.
person. And they seem to be very comfortable criticizing those ideas and speaking up. And in that sense, they've made me proud. However, I've also talked to students over the years, especially advisees, who have said, I can't believe what I'm being forced to, you know, sit through. This is madness. It feels creepy. And that they're more concerned about speaking up to that, because, and here's why I think that is because the students that I work with are in training. They want to become psychotherapists, and they take all of their they want to put all of their good intentions into their work with other people. And ideas like critical race theory are still sufficiently entwined with ideas like civil rights, such that it becomes very uncomfortable for these highly altruistic people who want to put their energy into helping other people to criticize these ideas. And it's so when I meet with them one-on-one, they almost sort of apologize before they tell me about what some of their concerns are with critical social justice or critical race theory. It's like they're still convincing themselves that, or they're still questioning, gosh, is the fact that I'm questioning this theory, does that mean that there's some part of me that is bad or racist or not altruistic? And they have a terribly difficult time with that. And then there are, I want to do some writing about this, but there's a group process that occurs as well. And for anyone who does not toe the line when it comes to the suppositions of critical race theory. There is a tremendous amount of pressure on those individuals who raise those questions to conform or else risk ostracization from their friends, to say nothing of the very pragmatic concern that are they to speak up too consistently or too loudly, not only do they risk social ostracization, but they risk damaging their careers. I live in a state that only has 600,000 people in a city that has about 40,000, and everybody knows everybody here. And so I think students who may not toe the line risk putting their careers in jeopardy by speaking up. And it's easier to just keep your head down, disengage, smile and nod.
Yeah,
And
it's very interesting because it's almost a priori this young, freshly out of college therapists will get into the field already overwhelmed with cognitive dissonance.
yes. Well, the one thing that I think is good, and I really hope this isn't changing, and I'm not speaking specifically about my graduates, but I've been hearing from other established therapists in our area about alarming things that are going on in school counseling, and some of the ideas that are being taken into individual counseling sessions. What I was about to say is that my hope is, and my observations have been, that the reality of the work with clients sort of further educates therapists who might have adopted identitarian ideas, and they sort of leave that identitarianism behind them, that they are able to address issues of race and gender and so forth without pursuing a political agenda in the sacred space of the therapeutic relationship. I think the reality of the work is, for want of a better word, a corrective experience for people who have begun to be indoctrinated into critical race theory. That said, it's much harder for those students who are going on to become school counselors because they are moving into a system that, you know, has also the public schools that have also adopted and expect the school counselors to perpetuate the suppositions of critical race theory in their work with students. I would imagine there's somewhat less pressure on therapists who go into private practice for themselves. I'm increasingly worried about the pressures that are going to be on therapists that work in community mental health centers, which again are very vulnerable to being infected by critical race theory.
It's very interesting because I find huge commonalities between what you do and what I do in one very important intersection, crucial intersection. The huge part of me being musician and me being professor of music is listening. Music is all about listening. And the part of therapy is listening. And recently, and many times before, my own daughter, oftentimes she calls me and she tells me, "Mom, can you just listen? I don't need your advice. Don't give me your damn advice. Can you just listen?" And oftentimes that's what people go to therapy for just to be listened to, just to unburden themselves. And how do you view the capacity of the therapist, the new breed of therapist who has this dissonance imposed from outside? How do you view that capacity of unprejudiced ability to listen?
Well, I don't know. So there's part of me that wants to give an academic answer and say, to use your example of your daughter for a moment, your daughter wouldn't have the same experience of speaking her concerns into a computer and having the computer say the concerns back to her. She wants you to listen, yes, but there's another layer of what's between you that's going on that is a sacred thing, especially in therapy, but certainly also in mother-daughter bonds and so forth. And that is the relationship. And from the relationship, and the therapeutic relationship is something that really transcends words, but the words that we have to describe them as therapists, what I tell new therapists and what all new therapists are trained to think about, is genuineness, empathy, and unconditional positive regard. That is, that you don't make judgments, that you're real with people, and that you see things from their point of view. And what that kind of relationship requires is a setting aside of any kind of agenda. The therapeutic relationship is for the client and for the client only. It is not there to satisfy the needs of the therapist. And that's the other thing that we teach and we teach and we teach and we teach. And what critical race theory, now that it's infected counseling to the degree that it has, is saying is that the therapist should meet their ideological and political needs at the expense of the client. It is a corruption of a sacred relationship. And I believe that counselors, they are placing themselves in a position when they follow this to begin to act not as therapists, but as ideological predators. People who are meeting their ideological needs at the expense of people who have entrusted them for professional help that is characterized by genuineness, unconditional positive regard, and empathy. It's not for the therapist. And what critical race theory is saying, it's not the individuals who are important, it's the groups. And individualism, which is essentially what therapy is, it's meeting the client where they're at and helping them to think about their situations. When you switch the conversation from one of a conversation with individuals to one that is about persons as a member of a group, the therapist's ideological needs to think that way begin to intrude on the sacred space of therapy.
But also it reduces even more the personhood of the client.
Oh man. And so many people who find their way to therapy have already experienced a reduction in personhood.
They need to be uplifted.
Well, many of them, what I said earlier, unconditional positive regard. Many of the people who find their way to therapy have been in situations and systems and in relationships characterized by conditional positive regard. I will like you, I will value you when X, Y, and Z. And that is precisely the logic of critical race theory. When you accept these suppositions and when you agree not to question them, then you will be viewed as okay as long as you continue to periodically confess and not to speak out of turn and so forth. It's the same rules that govern an abusive relationship. You see it all the time.
It's basically programs people to become Pavlov's dogs.
To become less than human, to react with a particular reaction in when presented with particular situations. And that certainly is true. And it's amazing how many people who, we're starting to hear now from many people who were sort of caught up in critical race theory and came out the other side. And they talked about, they consistently talk about how difficult it was to begin to talk, speak for themselves, and how difficult it was to question and so forth. And I what I hear they are saying and what I hear you're saying is it was so difficult for them to be human, fully and unconditionally human, as opposed to, completing themselves with the suppositions of this ideology.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I remember also what was tremendously impactful to me from your conversation with Ben Boyce. What I recall is when you mentioned that you've worked in prison.
Yeah. And
you said a few words about self-worth.
Yeah, it's so interesting. For people who haven't been around prison populations, I mean, there are, there are quite naturally stereotypes about what people who wind up in prison are like. But from what I saw, 85% of people that are in prison could be you or me. And there's nothing particularly unusual about them. What happened many times is they had difficult developmental histories and they got a hit of crystal meth or heroin at the wrong time and developed a habit and then got caught up and then ended up in jail. But they're like you or I. But of course, when you're in prison, you've lost everything, you become hopeless, you become suspicious of other people. And it's interesting how quickly, when you sit down with someone who's in prison, most people now, anyone who works with a prison population, nobody who is a professional in those circumstances is going to be naive and be manipulated and so forth. So I'm not suggesting that one should be naive, but when one sits down with a person who's been in prison and talks with them and treats them as a human being in that relationship that you talked about with your daughter, characterized not by advice, and not with judgment, but by unconditional positive regard, empathy. Wow, what would it be like if this was me? How would I be thinking this? And genuineness, being truthful about what you're experiencing in the relation. When you do that, even people who have done terrible things become better versions of themselves within the context of that relationship. Well, maybe not better versions of themselves is maybe the wrong word to use, but maybe more complete versions of themselves, maybe versions of themselves that are more secure, that they feel good about. And that's the power of relationship at work. That's the power of relationship with no conditions on it. Boundaries for sure, but no no conditions. You're not saying, I will view you as a human being when you meet X, Y, and Z conditions.
You maybe open that space for them to see themselves as something else that they
That's
never could imagine
brilliant.
they could be, and it's
That's it.
liberating.
That's it exactly. When they are in that, you have provided words for what I'm not able to say. In relationship with you in those circumstances, they can see the version of themselves that they would like to have. And I'm not telling them what that is, but they decide on their own what that is in the context of the relationship. And it's amazing. People who are in terribly difficult circumstances with terribly difficult developmental histories become, they can see the self that they want to be in the context of that relationship. And it doesn't really take that long.
Yeah. And I see a difference here between some sort of unaccomplishable dream and hope.
Yeah.
I call it active hope, when you actually clearly see what you can become.
Yes.
And you see that somebody right in front of you can see it also.
Well, and when you are treating them not as if they are that person, but as if they can be, when you're not, I don't know, somehow it comes back to not placing conditions on their personhood that matters. And yes, then they see that version of this, and it's not some pie in the sky, oh, I'm going to get out of here, I'm going to put my life together, and I'm going to make $1 million. It's, geez, tomorrow, there's going to be a little bit more of me there when I decide about how my day is going to go. And that's tremendously empowering.
Absolutely. You know what I find very freeing in my relationships to students? I'm always trying to be real with them. And real means talking about my own failures in life and how I overcame that. And it's strange because I should keep my authority, right? I should be Miss Perfection, right? Miss Expertise. And I find that's not what's working, but what's working, it's actually, hey, I've been there. I also failed. We all fail. And that makes us, that humanizes us. That we actually meet somewhere in a common area where we look at our imperfections together.
Oh, so important. We look at our imperfections and find that it's okay, that we don't deny that the imperfections are there. Mistakes that we might have made in the past do not become automatically okay. But whatever forces are out there that place judgment upon us, for family, society, or whatever, when we take responsibility for replacing those voices with our own, and when we make our own internal critics become fair in their judgments, that's tremendously empowering. And one of the things that people can do when they allow that to happen is look honestly at, what are my blind spots? Where are the times that I might not be the best version of myself? And just have more understanding, have more of a say about how we conduct ourselves under trying or difficult circumstances. But we must have that opportunity to look at those parts of ourselves that are vulnerable, that are uncertain, that are hurting, the parts of ourselves that we're afraid might be negatively evaluated by others, and present those. What's the question that I have? I would agree with you. There's something about this, I'm in charge, listen to my wisdom, persona that I think doesn't work. I think bringing one's true self to the classroom is an important part of the game, but I'm finding it increasingly difficult to do that, not because of the students, because students are going to be all over their place in terms of their development of their ideas. And of course, some are going to look to other people like administrators when they feel angry about something that I might say or a question that I might raise. And it's quite natural that students would do that from time to time. But what's making it terribly difficult is the eagerness that the university administration has to say, hey, if you hear something in class that upsets you, come let us know about it and we'll take care of it. Let us put a bias response team in place, and you can just call the bias response team and tell them you didn't like how this went down, and then we will look into the matter.
And that's another thing. I made a personal choice because anything can be considered as a microaggression.
Sure.
Anything, any word.
Sure.
And if we start censoring ourselves, which I noticed, oh, I sincerely want to share something, but then how it will be interpreted, how it will be misinterpreted, then we stop talking at all.
Yeah.
And the dialogue becomes more and more reduced. There is no dialogue because part of dialogue as any relationship, teacher, student, husband, wife, on any level, therapist and client, is certain degree of honest confrontation. Yes.
Yes, it is. And in psychotherapy, we have a has your perception changed? I mean, do you have more reservations about that honesty in the classroom now than you used to have?
No.
Oh.
Why? It doesn't mean I'm not afraid. But that's my personal decision. I'm not going to censor myself.
Yeah.
I'm teaching what I'm teaching.
Yeah.
And I will not allow quality of my work. That's sacred for me to get comfort, because I feel deeply responsible for what I bring to my students, and I bring to them exposure of certain things and certain deep stimulation for the minds through what I teach and sense of beauty. And I'm not going to allow that to be compromised. And that's why I'm kind of very calm about it, because I'm very sober about consequences I'm willing to face. So that's why I'm doing what I'm doing.
I think that's wonderful. And I think when I got a little more into the space that you're talking about, I stopped feeling so sick all the time. One of the things that I noticed, and this is just what makes it so difficult, is it seems like, especially over the last year, I spent the majority of my energy not thinking about what my lesson plan was, but how to defend myself against this more or less endless accusations. And not just coming from the students, but everywhere from within the university.
But that compromises the very quality of your teaching.
Oh, it does.
Which is sacred.
It does. But because like one of the things that I'm reconsidering, so my compromise I made with myself was that if the university in its wisdom decided that diversity, equity, and inclusion should be a part of every single class, then I would make it a part of every single class, but I would not tout a particular ideological line. And so so I think Shelby Steele. I think Shelby Steele, who I think does identify as a conservative, but he's got some very, very interesting ideas, certainly well thought out ideas about what constitutes systemic racism and what some of the fallout from America's history with slavery is. And he talks about how this plays out on, let's say, not individual interactions between people, but how it's played out in contemporary dialogues about race in this country. And so I was teaching Shelby Steele and Robin DiAngelo alongside of John McWhorter and Coleman Hughes and Shelby Steele. And so I decided that that would be my compromise, that I would bring those different voices in and steelman them to the best of my degree, to say, look, this is what DiAngelo is claiming, and not attack her ideas. And this is what McWhorter is claiming, and not attacking his ideas, but just exposing students to those things and being asked for feedback. But that just resulted in such extraordinary pushback, not from the students, but from the faculty and from the university. So I would get things, I would hear from university administrators things like, several students have complained about this test question, for example. And, that just puts me in a position where I'm like, okay, how many students is several and what did they say? I feel like I'm beginning to be in this position where I wish I had my attorney with me the whole time,
Right.
Taking down notes, because and this, again, I want to emphasize, this is not a problem with the students. This is a problem with the administration, who's saying, oh my gosh, you heard something that you didn't like, or somebody said something in a clumsy way, or you didn't like the wording of that test question. Let us take care of it for you.
Sometimes I feel it will be so much healthier for us just being allowed, being given space to do our job teaching without third party in the middle, because that third party, it's like heavy dressing in a sandwich.
Yeah, that's right. That's great. The psychotherapeutic term for that is triangulation. And it's when, and you see this all the time in families that are struggling, it's when, as opposed to people directly addressing the difficulty that is between them, a person will go and bring in an outside person. So what students are doing is, when this comes up, what they have been taught from day one is, if something upsets you, go talk to the program coordinator, go talk to your advisor, go talk to the department chair, go talk to the dean. And so then this third person comes in and, essentially many times places pressure on the professor to cede to the student's demands.
And it does not serve students, because it does not teach them confront another person, a professor, let's say, one-on-one, and solve it between them and maybe reach some understanding.
Right, so, that's right. And it's so unhealthy on many levels. I mean, I guess an analogy would be helicopter parenting, where a child goes off to school and the parent says, oh, let me do this and this and this. You won't be healthy unless I'm there to take care of it for you. That's what the university.
It's so funny, because I'm planning exactly a conversation with parent who is totally anti-helicopter. It's going to be fun.
Yeah.
And wonderful.
Oh, is it the, I'm blanking on her name, the Let Grow person?
No.
From letgrow.org.
No, 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 no.
I think that would be a wonderful
Someone I
conversation.
know, a father of my students,
Oh, okay. Yeah.
who is all about creating hardships for his children. No, which is amazing, amazing, amazing.
Well,
Yeah.
it is. It is. And I think that's one of the things that will end up turning things around in our country, is that when we find a way to let children struggle a little bit more. Again, a question that I ask my students is, what is the right developmental time for a child in life to learn that they're not popular, that maybe within a particular group of friends they are unliked? All of us have those experiences.
Absolutely.
When's the right time to be allowed to experience that? When's the right time in life to receive your first low grade? At what point are we supposed to experience that pain? And because it seems to me that so much of what's going on is that normal day-to-day interactions and life experiences are being recharacterized as trauma. And so one of the words that I run into all the time, and again, not from students, but from faculty, is the recharacterizing of normal day-to-day disagreements, or even the provision of particular ideas in a classroom as part of a heterodox conversation as traumatic.
And then
so
when the real trauma comes to life,
then when
and
the
it
real
will
trauma
sooner or
comes to life,
later, they
well,
absolutely have no tools to deal with it.
that's right. Well, and run real decisions and real pain. And so when they get, dropped off at college, and, they haven't maybe had the same chances to experience disappointment, for example, as previous generations have had, uh, 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 that translates into these absolute skyrocketing rates of depression and anxiety that's being experienced among 18 to 20-year-olds right now. It's an amazing spike. So something needs to happen in the parenting realm, but administrators at the university need to get out of the rescue business yesterday, because at some point, I don't think it's fear that would stop me from teaching in a heterodox manner, but just exhaustion. It's kind of like, oh my God, here's another email that says some people thought that you walked in an aggressive manner when you were in the room, is one that I've heard. And, oh, some people were upset by X, Y, and Z. Some people thought there should have been a trigger warning. And, if a student comes to me and says something like that, I can say, that's why that's a bad idea. You're going to be a therapist. You're going to be working with people who've had all kinds of difficult circumstances in their life. And there's no trigger warning when you are a therapist. So why would you want one now? Moreover, why would you want to ask a man to protect you from something? Why not work on your ability to hear things that are uncomfortable for you, as opposed to being able to have those conversations? That's translating into messages that are coming from, the dean or whoever, that says, several students were concerned and people were feeling harmed. Most recently, our dean, which this is what prompted me to make a public video, is that that the dean of our College of Education and Social Services had sent around an email that said interactions around the integration of diversity, equity, and inclusion into our curriculum, which meant discussions, were causing harm. And that was, so, I mean, talk about screwed up triangulation. Here's this guy coming in and saying,
Yeah.
hey, just do what everyone wants and stop making so much noise so that people won't be harmed. And so, I wrote back and said, well, how are you defining harm? Are people beating each other up, or, are they screaming racial epithets at each other? What are you talking about? I still haven't received an answer to that. But at some point, it just gets exhausting to hear, the power words are a group of students expressed concern. Well, okay, why don't you send them to me so that we can talk about it? I bet we can come to a resolution all without you.
Yeah. I think we really need some revival of good, spicy comedy.
Good spicy
satire.
comedy. We need to cut the budgets of colleges and universities if they are using that money inappropriately to hire administrators that are getting in the way of the process. And clearly that's what's going on right now, is there's this nanny class of administrator that just needs to get the hell out of the way. I mean, if the college is spending money on a bias response team, imagine what we could do with that money if we really put it into important educational initiatives rather than these ridiculous nannying kinds of initiatives.
Absolutely. And I think this day will come, and I will do anything I can from my side to bring people to realize that no one will help them to solve their problems.
That's right.
But themselves, talking face to face with other people.
And they'll feel so much better when they do it. Even if the other person doesn't do what you want them to do, even if you walk away from a situation where you agree to disagree, that leaves a relationship resolved. We may not have agreed on the resolution to the difficulty, but we've resolved it between us. And that's impossible to do when students are being sent the message over and over again, for God's sake, don't handle this on your own. Come tell the administration when there's a problem.
Yeah. And even if I think in a family relationship, fighting is very important, because through fight, if both sides have healthy sense of humor, you sort it out, right? You fought, and then it's a fresh reset.
I remember a particular student who came to me, and we did that. She said, I think you call on men more often than you call on women. And I thought that I didn't. And so here we were, and we I don't know, we kind of had this fight about it. And it didn't get nasty or anything, but we're like, I'm like, well, how am I supposed to prove this to you? I don't get it. Why do you think this about me? And she's like, you don't know what it's like. I can't remember exactly what the resolution was, but there was a resolution.
Yes.
And we were so much closer after that. And I to this day, I don't know if she ever ended up agreeing with me. I never agreed with her, but we had such a better relationship as a result of this. And she said that that having that conversation helped her in her life. So I think those things need to be allowed to happen. But what universities are doing are providing whole classes of administrators who are making sure that students don't have to have those conversations. And many times what they will say is that they are protecting students from, wait for it, harm. And harm, I think, is going to go down for the last 5 years is the most irresponsibly used word in higher education, and trauma will be a close second.
Yes. Well, let's hope that students will get tired and bored of being fed, spoon-fed, same oatmeal every day, 3 times a day.
Oh, you know, they're hungry for it. They want it, and they want spaces that are conducive to talking about these kinds of issues. They want heterodoxy, but
Yeah.
you know, research tells us right now that 60% of them feel the need to hide, and the only
Yeah.
people who don't experience that anxiety are the people who identify the furthest on the left. So the ideas that are most okay to share
Yeah.
on campus right now.
Aaron, would you agree? Because I'm plotting to actually invite some of Gen Zers to this channel to have a honest conversation with them, how they think about all this thing.
What a great
Would you
idea.
agree to be a part of this conversation?
Oh, you know, that would be a treat, and count me
First
in.
hand,
I will
first
be
hand.
there. Oh, you tell me when, and I will be there for sure.
Okay, Aaron, we're wrapping up for today, but I'll see you soon. I hope with Jody Shaw, right?
Oh, yeah, that's right. I can't wait. It's going to be so much fun.
It's going to be. Thank you so much.
Okay, it was a real pleasure. Thank you so much for
Yes.
having me on your channel.
Thank you, Aaron, and to be continued.
Okay, to be continued.
Bye. Bye.
Okay, I think that went well.
Yeah.
Did you get what you wanted?
Let me stop.